It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 671 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. Hey, I couldn't be more thrilled with the guests I've lined up for you today. Joining me is Harvey MacKay. Now, Harvey MacKay is the author of multiple New York Times bestsellers, including one of my all-time favorites, the New York Times #1 bestseller, Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive, and Beware the Naked Man Who Offers You His Shirt. Quite a long title, but love it. Love the book. He's also chairman of the MacKay Mitchell Envelope Company. So Harvey will be joining me. Unfortunately, Bridget won't be able to join us today. There's a story behind this, but I'll let her share the story when she's back in action. Today's show is brought to you in part by our friends at Discover.org. The Discover.org platform is a game changer for sales and marketing professionals. This feature-rich sales intelligence platform is supported by more than 250 researchers who continually update contact data and provide account-specific insight to help sales and marketing teams break ahead of the pack. So see the product live at discoverorg.com/schedule-demo. That's discoverorg.com/schedule-demo. All right, as I mentioned before, I'm really excited to talk with my guest today, Harvey MacKay. The topic is really about relationships in sales, relationships in life. Among the things we're going to dive into are why it's important for you in sales to know everything you can about your customer, and why knowing that about your customer is just as important as knowing everything about your product, if not even more important. And then we're going to dive into what knowing your customer really means, because it really boils down to really understanding what your customer wants. Because all of us gather data about our customers, about the people we want to influence. The question is, how well do we understand it, and what do we do with it? All right, here we go. Harvey MacKay, welcome to the show.
Andy, I've been looking forward to this. I'm excited.
Well, good. Well, as am I. So I'm really looking forward to it as well. I think I read your first book, Swim with Sharks, right when it was published, I think. So that was that was a while ago, not to date myself unnecessarily, but as we were talking about before we started recording, it was one of those books that was on my bookshelf that I took some really distinct lessons from. And this is, I think, part of what we're doing here with the people in the audience is we want them to educate themselves as much as they can about sales, selling, people, psychology, so on, anything that could make a difference for them. And that was one of the books that made a difference for me.
Thank you. I think the goal that I've always had is take-home value. I'd like people to hear my lecture, read my national syndicated column, read my book. Just imagine now if every listener out there, every viewer out there could just pick up a book, get one or two ideas, and use those ideas the rest of your life. Wow. So I call that knowledge does not become power until it's used.
Right.
Ideas without action and they are worthless.
Yeah, and I along with that, I've always been a believer that, as Brian Tracy, I think, who said, if you just read one book a month about your field, right, guarantee within 12 months you'll be in the top 1%. And I firmly believe that.
He's quite a guy, and I love his writings, and I agree with him.
Yeah. All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. If people aren't familiar with you, if they haven't read any of your books, 2 bestsellers, Swim with Sharks, the one I was referring to earlier, Swim with Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive, and Beware the Naked Man Who Offers You a Shirt. Great titles, both.
Well, I can give you I suspect a 30 to 60 second elevator speech. I'm a Twin Cities businessman, born and raised in St. Paul, University of Minnesota, which is right in my back door. Was going to be a professional golfer.
But didn't know that. Okay.
Got up after playing against those Southern kids. And I've got, my father was head of the Associated Press, national syndicated columnist also. So I've got about 10 million books out, 80 countries that I'm proud of course, 46 different languages. Then I get to speak once a week, Andy, the last 30 years to a Fortune 1000 company somewhere in the world. That's India, Pakistan, China, Burma, all over the world. And I write that national syndicated column for approximately 10 million newspapers. That's 100 newspapers, 22 years of writing that column. And then my 7 books, I guess I'm kind of proud that also our New York Times bestsellers, but really proud that the two that you mentioned, Swim with the Sharks, Without Being Eaten Alive, Beware the Naked Man, who offered to serve. New York Times named the top 15 books, business inspirational books of all time, last 100 years. I have two of them on there, which are those two books, along with Dale Carnegie and Norman Vincent Peale and Stephen Covey.
So, right. And for people watching and listening to this is, and I stress this all the time with companies and teams I work with, is that there are books that are classics that don't age, don't become outdated. And I just went back through in preparation for our talk today. Just went back through and reread Swim with Sharks.
Thank you.
And I have clients who all the time, every year, I have new clients that I recommend. They read this, they read Tom Hopkins, they read Zig Ziglar, they read your Stephen Covey's book, obviously. And allow me to give your viewers a hot tip. Okay? Yeah, please.
That is, I find virtually none, very few people that do this. A person's life equals the total sum of his or her experiences. Mm-hmm. And so people come up to me the last 30 years. Oh, I read Swim with the Sharks. Oh, I loved your book. All over the world, they tell me that. But guess what? They read it when they're 19, 20, 21, 23. Our lives change.
Yep.
And therefore, I think every classic, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill,
right.
Again, Dale Carnegie, you have to pick that book up every single year. And you can't read those books. Big mistake if you read those books. You have to study them, underline them, highlight them, post-it notes, rough them up, and then every year pick them up again, because look at the experiences you've had. You haven't been stabbed in the back, before. You haven't had someone come in and slash your prices. You haven't had someone come in and pirate your employees. Myriad of reasons why you want to read those books over and over and over again.
Exactly. And I think that we have sort of this issue in sales, and I'm passionate about this, is I think it's been true forever. I think it's getting a little worse now, is that people aren't investing enough in themselves in terms of educating themselves. Yeah, I like to distinguish between education and training. I think that we have more than enough training that for the most part, it's not very effective. But what we don't have enough of is education, and professionals educating themselves, or even companies educating their employees.
Well, of course, I couldn't agree more.
No, good.
Without question. Let me just tell you, maybe in a different offshoot, or to piggyback on what you've just said. Part of my modus operandi is the number of coaches I've had in my life, and I still have about 15 or 20 of them. Mm-hmm. I have a speech coach. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a voice coach. I have a language coach. I've studied Russian, Chinese, Japanese, and Arabic a little bit. Have a marathon coach. I happen to be a marathoner. Have a tennis coach, a golf coach. Have a memory coach out of New York. Have a social media coach. Have a dancing coach, thanks to my wife. But anyway, why do I have all these coaches? Because whatever my God-given talent is, whatever my God-given potential is, that's it. I can't do any better. So if I have a project, Andy, I have a time and action calendar. Mm-hmm. Then I go out and get the best manpower, the best brains that I can, the best coaching on that subject. Then I focus. Then I leave it all out on the field. Try my guts out. Mm-hmm. And guess what? I don't ever have to worry, because I can't do any better.
Right.
And that's what, of course, is some of the things I teach. And of course, you're just so spot on. Got plenty of training out there. But of course, remember, all that training, I say practice makes perfect. That's not true. You have to add one word. Perfect practice makes perfect. Mm-hmm. 20 million golfers out there in the United States. And let me just tell you, all right, among those 20 million golfers, a lot of them are playing 8 days a week. A lot of them are practicing 8 days a week. But what are they doing? They're perfecting an error They put a ceiling on what they can become. So therefore, you must practice the right concepts over a long period of time. And just what you said earlier, too, got to do a lot of education. There's night school. There's two things in life. I think Charlie Tremendous Jones said this. All right. It's the people you meet and the books you read. That can change your life.
Well, I think one of the things with training, though, that we see, and it's always, again, I think it's always been the case, but I think it's more pervasive now, is that, and I'll use a golf analogy here, but they're trying to make everybody be the same. And this is one of the things you really talk about in your book is that I'm a passionate believer in, is that I wasn't the same as anybody else. I sell my own way, and it's as a result of reading all these books and being mentored by other people and coached by people and so on. So I take all these influences and make it myself and my own. I utilize and optimize my own strengths, my own unique abilities. But we're trying to take that away from people these days. And the golf analogy for me is always, look at a golfer. For people who follow golf, the best golfers of sort of the 90s and the 2000s was Jim Furyk, who has a very idiosyncratic swing, to say the least, compared to all the other pros. But, won the U.S. Open and, was one of the most successful golfers of his generation. And he resisted changing, and people have, wow, because this worked for him. He optimized it. And training now is like, let's turn somebody into a clone of somebody else, as opposed to let's optimize your value, your benefit that you can offer to us.
Well, I prepared to win a little bit. We've never met before, but I did look up your work, as I said, studied it a little bit, agree with it 100%, because you are a differentiator. Is every leader the same? Do they have the same teaching modes, same ethics, same everything? No. And you also, when we're talking about a leader or a salesperson, all right, just remember, they're all over the map. You don't have to be a born salesperson. You become a salesperson. That's what you talk about. Right. That's what you teach. And so therefore, let me just give you a quick little example.
Sure.
They both happen to be, luckily, very close personal friends. But let's just take two fabulous coaches. Look at Tony Dungy and the way Tony coaches on the sidelines like this. And I know him quite well. I recruited him to the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, played defensive back,
second father to him. He's got that laid back style. Now let's go to the opposite. Lou Holtz.
Right.
My best friend in the whole world outside of my family. Talk every other day for 30 years. He's walked 5,000 miles on that sideline. He is an all-time motivator. I've been in the locker room with him for 30 years of coaching. Another Vince Lombardi,
right?
Knute Rockne, and yet they're all different kinds of coaches. See, you don't have to be a Holtz with that style, but that's his style, and you have to be yourself, just as you say. Everyone's different. Every three, I don't know. I think there's 7.2 billion people. Okay, and every single person is different.
Yeah, and it's sort of controversial. When I talk to groups of salespeople and with their managers in the room, I say, sometimes you just have to say no to your manager. They want you to do a certain thing a certain way, and they've experienced, they've got insights. Take that into account. But if it doesn't align with who you are personally, your values, your character, it's not going to be authentic. It's going to be transparent to the buyer that that's not really you. You're sort of going through the motions, and you'll never make that connection with that other human being the way you want, unless you're truly yourself.
Let me make an observation, okay, when it comes to sales. I'm a lucky guy, speaking once a week, as you know, for 30 years.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether there's 1, 3, 5, 7, 10,000 people in the audience. They will be representing bankers and insurance company and HR and sales and techies and all that. And I'll make the statement now, this whole conglomeration of different industries. I'll make the statement that whether you agree with me or not, no one can talk me out of this statement. And that is as follows. Every single person in this audience is a salesperson. Why do I say that? Because from the moment you get up in the morning to the moment you go to bed, what are you doing all day? All right? You're negotiating, you're communicating, you're persuading, you're influencing.
Influencing, right, exactly.
Ideas. So then I say, if you don't think you are a salesperson, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting segue to one of the things I want to talk to you about, because when I talk to groups of salespeople, I put a question up on the board. I said, and the question is, what's your job? And they all think their job is to sell something. And it's like, well, not really. What's your job is, first of all, you have to form a connection and a relationship with a buyer, and then you have to serve them. And the sale is an outcome of doing those two things. But we're excited. We've got people just think, yeah, my job is to sell something. So if my job is to sell something, it's something I'm doing to someone as opposed to doing it with them. And that makes all the difference in the world. I mean, you give the examples in your book of one potential client that you nurtured for 6 years or something, and before you finally got the business buzz because of how you served in the interim while you were following up, that you got that business.
Once again, right on. Let me talk about, because you mentioned earlier. Okay, and of course the key word is relationships. Without question, it's relationships to start out with. Then comes the serving. But I have this MacKay 66 that you kind of referred to.
Oh yeah, tell people about it.
When I was 21 years old, I had 300 accounts. I was selling envelopes in the Twin Cities in the state of Minnesota, a little bit go to South Dakota, but 300 accounts. And I decided that I'd make a list. I sat down and made a list of 66 questions. So if, Andy, I were calling on you, I want to know a little bit about your background, your education. If you happen to be married, do you have children? Where did you go to school? Where did you get your education? What are your politics? I want to know your interests. Where are you taking your vacations? How many jobs have you had? What do the kids do? What are your interests? These are 66 questions. Again, what I call humanize your selling strategy. So if I'm calling on you, Andy, I don't care if I'm selling envelopes, widgets, nuts and bolts, securities, industry, insurance, doesn't matter what. Okay, the concept will not change. We will not be talking 100% business when I'm across that purchasing table from you.
Right.
All right. Your purchasing manager, maybe any transaction, any communication, any negotiation. So if I know all of those 66 things, and of course, 5 are better than 2, 20 are better than 10, 30 are better than 20, I build that up. I make a call on you. I read the desk. I read the walls. I hopefully get you to lunch or dinner. I ask questions about all those 66 things I wanted to know skillfully.
Conversationally.
Then you can't, we're going to talk about some of those things. Hey, did you see the Yankees got slaughtered last night? And I know that you hate Yankees. It's just one little tiny thing, just making that up. But that's how you reach someone with a relationship. You always want to go deep with a relationship. That's all.
Yeah,
just can't be on the outside a little bit and cold. You must go deep. And from my perspective, you can't go deep without the 66. That's why Swim with the Sharks sold 5 million copies. Now my sales force, they went ballistic. When I put that in a book, are you kidding me? And I said, look, I can tell you one thing. Out of every 100 people that read this, okay, 50% are going to forget right away, because you forget 50% of what you hear in 4 hours.
Right.
And I said, there'll only be really, truly 1 in 10 that are going to follow this concept. All right. And guess what? We've had a 20, 30, 40-year head start on them.
That's right.
So I'm not worried about it.
Well, and this is a really important lesson for people who are selling today, is because especially in segments of the tech business and people using inside sales methodologies where they have sort of their appointment setters making their first calls and so on, is they've got lists of scripted questions, go 1 through 10. And if you listen, which I do, to recordings of these phone calls, they ask a question, they dutifully write down the answer, then there's a pause while they're looking for the next question, they ask it again. and they're not going that one level deeper or two level deeper to really understand the person they're dealing with. And I told you before we started recording that when I read your book the first time, is I used it in part of it. I wasn't going 66, but I believed very passionately in this idea that the more information you have about somebody that you're dealing with, the better off you are.
Boring, that's what I call it. Really boring. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
No one ever sold anyone anything by boring them to death.
Right. So it's like, that's right. How do you have a conversation? I got taught this lesson, reinforced actually even earlier in my career before I read your book, is I was dealing with a gentleman that owned a chain of jewelry stores in the Bay Area. And I was selling a computer system. And I was fresh out of school. It was one of my, I don't know, I was 21 or 22 years old. Looked like I was 12. And so we had, we hit it off pretty well. But for some reason, I was pretty confident I was going to get the order, but that just wasn't coming. But yet he would still talk to me. And he was older. He was near retirement age. And I think he was enjoying sort of mentoring me. But I wasn't getting the order. My boss was convinced that I needed to take it off my forecast. I said, no, I'm going to get it. And he said, well, hey, I'm going to come out with you and we're going to talk to him. And I thought, no, that's embarrassing. Have my boss come with me. So I go out, and it finally dawned on me when he very nicely talked to me and brought me into his office. But right on his desk were pictures of his grandkids, and they're all in soccer uniforms and various pictures. And he was just waiting for me to ask about his grandkids. And it just sort of dawned on me there. It's like, oh, it's a lesson we all go through. We have to learn early in our careers. I thought I was doing a great job selling, but that he was saying, look, the relationships are so important. And he basically told me afterwards, that's what he was waiting for. He was waiting for me to get more personal. And once I did, he gave me the order. I have, when I open up the 66, I say people don't care how much you know about them once they realize how much you care about them. Yeah. That's what I say. Incidentally, just a brief aside, you mentioned jewelry, and I think of retail, and retail is detail, Andy. But working my way through college, I was working at Howdy from Howard's, downtown St. Paul, 7th and Wabasha, and learned two quick things. I was selling, the underwear, the ties, the shirts, forth. Never the big ticket items. And they taught me two things I learned. Don't ever put more than 3 ties on the counter. You will confuse the customer. And number 2, which I really, really like though, never say goodbye. Walk that customer all the way out through the store, out into the street, and say goodbye. I still remember that from 100 years ago. Yeah, no, I love that. Well, my first job was selling women's shoes in JCPenney. In Madison, Wisconsin, where I grew up. We're both Midwesterners. Yes. And my first day on the job was the day of a huge snowstorm. And so it was like the signal went out to everybody to go get their winter boots for the season. And so I was inundated the first day. And I had all these sort of prototypical stories. They almost seemed like stereotypical stories of I'd measure a woman's foot, we'd pick out a shoe, and then they wanted it in a different size than what I'd measured. And I thought, well, maybe I'm doing this wrong. It's like, I'm trying to provide good service, but they want something different than what I thought they should be getting. And I was sort of pressing. And, that first day I just learned this lesson. It wasn't about what I thought was right. It was about what the customer thought was right and what they wanted best. And it was just like huge eye opener. So it was, besides being somewhat mortifying, putting women's boots on, but good experience for a 16-year-old guy. Oh, without question. And let me just tell you, I'm an aphorism junkie because my father, once again, was a newspaper man. So on we should call it the icebox. He'd have 30, 40, 50 aphorisms. And always would have an extra one that he made up. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up in a home with aphorisms. Right. I just followed my father's footsteps. But I do have many hundreds of them because I've never written a column without putting down there MacKay's moral. And also in the chapters in my book, almost all my books have a MacKay's moral at the end.
So when you mentioned experience, when a person with money meets a person with experience, here's what happens. The person with the experience winds up with the money, and the person with the money winds up with the experience.
I like that one.
It just triggered my mind.
Yeah, I like that one. Well, I mean, it's. I want to get back to the 66 thing because, yeah, you and I think see eye to eye on some of this. But I think it's a really important lesson is that salespeople are being trained today, back to this training word, that customers are too busy to engage in small talk, that they're too busy to have this personal relationship, that it's, and I think it's nonsense, is on one hand. And it's sort of being encouraged by people saying, well, hey, we've got all this artificial intelligence and machine learning and other technologies coming down the line that in some cases may supplant what salespeople are doing, which again, I think the opposite is going to be true. I think that when we do see, and we are seeing technology in some places rightfully come into sales and do certain things, but the ability to form the relationship with another human being, I think becomes a more valuable skill in that environment, not a less valuable. That's your differentiation. Everybody's machine's going to be the same. You, the human, are going to be the differentiator. And so people really need to take this seriously about the fact that you can't rely on technologies. And same thing with your 66 questions. The MacKay 66s, salespeople, again, are sort of trained as, well, go spend 2 minutes on LinkedIn and look at somebody's profile and their social, and you sort of get learn about them. And they're sort of learning about them, but then there's the learning about with the MacKay 66, which is, we're going to do a deep dive and not an interrogation. Over the course of several calls and meetings, you're going to gather this information. But again, so often our discovery and our relationship building that people are being trained on is more of an interrogation than relationship building.
True story yesterday. Had a fellow from New York call me, young millennial, okay, in his early 20s, quite bright, asked for my advice. He's going to make a sales stop and try to close a very substantial order, close to a couple $100,000 order, to build a particular website for this customer. And he said, any suggestions? Might you be able to help me? Only known him a little while. And so I started asking him some questions. I said, well, first of all, where does he live? And he said New York, and I happen to know the fellow was from a different city.
Right.
Number two, I said, is he married? I don't know. I said, what was his background? I don't know. He didn't have one answer to the 66 at all, but he knew everything, triple, super, sharp, techie, all right, about what he was going to sell him. That he knew something about. So his probability of making the sale just went down from my perspective. And so I told him, if you would have talked to me about a year ago and you would have built the relationship, you would have been a huge favorite to make the sale. I don't know what's going to happen right now. But, millennials, they are different, and they are different depending where you live. The millennials in Minneapolis or North Dakota or South Dakota might be a little bit different than California, New York.
Sure.
And just one little thing about millennials, this is my experience only. They really don't care about money as much as the prior generations have done. They're interested, of course, but they want to be heard.
They want to be heard, and I think they want to achieve. I mean, this is I think one of the real misconceptions that people have about millennials is because again, I work with them all the time. Is for my money, the hardest working, most motivated generation I've seen for a while, and partly because they brought up in this age where they just don't accept things at face value, right? The things have to be the way they are just because that's the way they are. And I think that's a great mindset to have. Is that okay? Why can't we change this? And this goes.
You said you work with them. I'm a lucky guy. Last 25 to 30 years, I've been speaking to the major MBA programs in the United States, the Harvard, Stanfords, the Whartons, Michigan, but also get to be commencement speaker. And so recently, University of Southern California, a few years back, Penn State. And so I get a feel, touch, and pulse of what these young people are thinking about. And that really helps me. Keeps me young also. So it really, truly helps.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate. The mission that I have and that you've had for your career is about the personal, the human to human aspect of selling. Because again, I think that just generationally, they're digital natives. They're more accustomed to messaging that's more virtual, more digital. But that's not the same relationship. I mean, you can use it to answer some of those 66. You can use it to start to get to know someone, but nothing replaces the face-to-face and the in-person even. And as much as this is a great substitute for travel sometimes, but sometimes you just got to get on a plane or get in your car and go see a customer. I mean, you got to be able to see the body language, and that's being devalued. And I think it's going to come full circle. I feel like the trend is starting to happen.
I agree.
But it's just something that needs to be encouraged, and people listening and watching this have to think to themselves, is every time you have an opportunity to actually go see somebody. And it's surprising. I'll talk to some sales managers about, I've got this really brilliant strategy for you, how to close more sales. And what's that? Well, leave the office and go meet the customer in person.
Andy, can I tell you the new venture in 180 seconds, what I'm working on?
Sure, go ahead.
Just because it's a little transformational. I started 3-4 years ago at Harvey MacKay University, where I have some top videos of top people, of course, like Lou Holtz, John Maxwell, and so forth. The best of the best, the Ken Blanchards, the Gittimers. And it's on sales, marketing, negotiations, entrepreneurship, leadership, hiring, firing, time management, visualization, creativity. Anyway, and I got all these speakers, and I'm very proud of it because I had a round table. I brought all these speakers in and then started the university. So now I'm launching in the next 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, that was 1.0. Now we're going to 2.0, and I'm calling it the Harvey MacKay Academy. And these are totally new speakers, totally new videos, totally new presentations, interviews, everything. And I'm going to launch it worldwide. I'm going to try to cut into some of those 7 billion people out there that I know are hungry and starved, quite frankly, especially if you're an American. If you're an American, the book's in 80 countries, I can reach quite a few people. And when the books are in those countries and you're an American, boy, do they love Americans and do they love American business people. So that's what I'm going to be doing in the next 2 to 4 weeks. Quite proud of the new venture.
Well, excellent. Good. All right. Well, make sure people check that out. And unfortunately, we sort of run out of time, but do you have any...
run out of time? We've only been talking 5 minutes.
It seems like, all right. We'll get the contact information. We'll put it on the website so people can see that. They can get access to that.
We have time for one more major point.
Sure, go ahead.
This is my whole life, along with the 66. There are a million words in the English language. And if you don't understand this one little 4-letter word, you can't be a CEO, can't be a president, can't be a coach, can't be president of the university, can't be a sales manager. You have no chance whatsoever. And what is that 4-letter word? HIRE. If you can't hire, you have no chance. That's all there is to hire the right president of a university, right through the roof. Hire the wrong, straight down. Hire the right coach, straight up. Hire the right CEO, boom. And so that's what I've been concentrating really on my last 40, 50 years in business. I've studied it all over the world, how to interview and how to hire great people.
Well, hugely important. And I've got something that I'm releasing here shortly about how to make your hiring process more data-driven, take some of the emotion out of it, because that's a problem that, especially in small business, they really have is you'll see a hiring manager, they don't like the process, so they meet somebody that sort of, looks good in a suit, presents themselves well, and they don't validate that they're the right fit or verify their qualifications. And, it's a mishire, which costs money. You're aware of how much that costs to have a bad hire. So, I think that's a really critical aspect that could be so much better performed than it is today. And we've got some stuff coming out about that as well.
Well, I've truly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have as well.
Nice chatting with you. Look forward to the next time.
As well, I do, and we'll make sure that happens. And next time I'm in the Midwest, we'll get together.
Wishing you good luck and get the order wherever you go.
All right. Thanks, Harvey.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Harvey. Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for this week. First of all, I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to thank my guest, Harvey MacKay. Join me again next week as I am joined by Chris Hallberg. Chris is author of the book titled The Business Sergeant's Field Manual, Military-Grade Business Execution Without the Yelling and the Push-Ups. One of my favorite titles. All right, unfortunately, I think Bridget will still not be with us next week, but hopefully she'll be back by the following week. So that's something to look forward to as well. So thanks again to our sponsor, Discover.org, for their ongoing support of Accelerate. And thanks again to you for joining me. And until next week, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.